Stories don't have one way of being told, and although this story doesn't convey its ideas in a revolutionary way, that by no means makes it poorly done. At least, this isn't the tipping point for what makes one kind of story good or bad. Romantic storytelling really puts the writing in the forefront, with most of the key moments just being between the characters. Because of this, every character interaction should be meaningful, with ways to develop the various relationships, the characters themselves, and the world they're in. Secondarily, it's important to develop the world around them so the viewer can better understand the context of the various characters' relationships. The map of Tiny Perfect Things for the most part is simple. A Groundhog Day-like story with a heavy focus on the romance aspects alongside some themes of having to move forward and finding meaning in one's life. It's a well-used idea in fiction, my favorite example being from the anime Rascal Doesn't Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai, but that by no means is a bad thing. The strongest aspect of this movie was definitely the characters' chemistry with one another and the dialogue as a whole. What really made every conversation between the main characters Mark and Margaret so interesting was the direction alongside some fantastic writing. For example, take this scene where they're both walking around the town talking to each other about how finding the perfect things didn't break the time loop. Without a care in the world, going from location to location, either helping or messing with things. A fantastic way to show how much they've experienced during the time loop. Their entire conversation is set to the backdrop of the town around them. Even how the scene is shot makes everyone else seem like an NPC from a video game. Only when Margaret confronts Mark at the dining area of a restaurant does the town seem to wake from its trance, if only for just a moment. The witty dialogue was a joy to listen to, and the way each of them showed more and more things they knew about the loop was so clever. For example, the man that gets bird poop on his head unless he stopped for a second, or the janitor that plays the piano in a storage room were all just nice moments of, as the title suggests, tiny perfect things. Something else the story does really well, making the smaller aspects meaningful. The first thing they start doing together is documenting the various cool things that happen on the day they're stuck on. This leads to an entire map being drawn up every single day by Mark to make sure it isn't forgotten, which was a nice touch. A lot of the nice moments come from this dynamic, Mark having to set everything up he wants to do in the span of one day. Like when he pays off the school's theater club to make him a makeshift lunar landing set to help impress Margaret, who one day wants to be an astronaut. Another interesting choice they made for this story was the amount of silence and pausing in the dialogue. Throughout the story, Mark and Margaret will be talking, but at certain points they both just fall silent. Sometimes it felt like a scene wasn't shown to explain the sudden change in tone, but at other moments it felt like a natural progression within the flow of conversation. A trap one can fall into when writing dialogue is having it be static without any changes in tone, mood, etc. This movie actually works with that idea pretty well, with constant changes in communication, attitudes, everything I would want from dialogue to make it feel rich and well thought out. Another small integration that I thought was just a fun plot point to explore was the fourth dimension, which ultimately was causing the time loop to occur. Well, that and the tongue-in-cheek explanation of Margaret's wish to have time stop causing the temporal anomaly. It's mostly a hand wave, but a warranted one since the implications of the time loop aren't necessarily the point of the story. Suspension of disbelief is a good way to help narrow a story down to the aspects that are most relevant, but if not done correctly, then the story can just feel disjointed and the logic goes all over the place. The interactions with Mark's friend Henry were a nice break in the story with some lighthearted insight into the character's thoughts and feelings. But one thing from this movie I didn't expect was the progression of Mark's character and the shift in perspective. Mark's character arc throughout this movie, aside from trying to get with Margaret and leaving the time loop, is to help improve his character. More specifically, to improve his sense of selfishness. Though I think the movie does fail to properly establish this aspect of his character aside from a couple minor scenes. The vast majority of the movie he is thinking about other people to some degree, just not when it comes to his parents or his sister. More and more as the story goes on though, he starts to become more selfless, doing things during the time loop to make other people happy, and eventually comes to the realization that the time loop isn't happening because he needs to do something or become better. The time loop is because of Margaret. From this point on, the movie shifts to Margaret's point of view and we see how she starts out each time loop. We see that she is chipping her nail polish herself each morning because of the anxiety and pain she is feeling. It all ends with her figuring out where the final perfect thing is to break the loop and reuniting with Mark to confess her feelings for him, creating the final perfect moment. I'm not exactly sure why he was at the pool when Margaret got there. It did feel a bit strange, but nothing that broke my immersion. Though from a tongue-in-cheek, less world-building perspective, it's just a fun story quirk to engage with. For a romance story that takes a lot of ideas from other stories, it does so much right to cement itself as something unique. The characters are strong, believable, and the town the story is set in is fun to explore. The little aspects are really what make character-heavy stories shine. The bonds created, the tension and conflicts that form, all of it creates a special kind of romance. And I can't get enough of the movie's directing, with each scene just feeling so fluid and it never stops with such unique imagery. The pacing is strong. There was never a loop where I felt like the screen time was wasted. I highly recommend any of you that haven't seen this movie to seek it out. Sometimes you have to allow yourself to move on and not hold everything hostage just to prevent the future. You never know when a moment can be your favorite of them all. The map of Tiny Perfect Things has a lot of near perfect parts about it, and I hope I showed some of them. This was the art of romantic storytelling. I hope to see you next time.